Hi, I'm Fox San Antonio's Jessica Headley.
And I'm Ryan Wolf.
Our greatest responsibility is to serve our
Treasure Valley communities,
the El Paso, Las Cruces communities,
Eastern Iowa communities,
Mid-Michigan communities.
We are extremely proud of the quality, balanced journalism that CBS 4 News produces.
But
we are concerned about the trouble and trend of irresponsible, one-sided news stories plaguing our country.
The sharing of biased and false news has become all too common on social media. More alarming, some media outlets publish these same fake stories without checking facts first.
The sharing of biased and false
news has become all too common on social media.
More alarming, some media outlets publish these same fake stories without checking facts first.
Unfortunately, some members of the media use their platforms to push their own personal bias and agenda to control exactly what people think. And this is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
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 So Anderson, what influence do you think the CIA has when it comes to mainstream media?
Dude, you're being just ridiculous.
To manipulate the news and mainstream media? So Anderson Cooper has 3 security guards all around him now. He actually hid in a car for me. Get just one statement from you. But this time he actually talked. Hey Anderson, we had a great interview last time. I was wondering if you get a chance to look into Operation Mockingbird? You know what that is.
You're talking about something, what, from the 1950s, dude?
1970s official declassified program, how the CIA infiltrated the mainstream media from the higher up.
Right.
It's declassified.
I read about it in college, yes, I do. Thanks.
Do you think it's something that could possibly be happening today?
I have no comment for you, thanks, dude.
Well, can Operation Mockingbird still happen today? Before we can answer that, try to ask yourself the following questions. When is the last time you questioned what you were being told? Do you think that the mainstream news has your best interest? And if they don't, do you think that they would omit, suppress, and lie to the mass population? And if they would lie, for what purpose? Why would they do it? Because if they are telling a lie, that means that there is a truth that we aren't supposed to know. In today's society, I believe that we've adopted a very dangerous practice. And that practice is that no one knows how to question anything anymore. Everyone just accepts everything for what it is. And to question the media and the authorities, you are called dumb, stupid, and the new term they like to use,
get this crazy conspiracy
theorist.
QAnon is a baseless conspiracy.
Suggesting a conspiracy exists without...
He is spreading a conspiracy theory. That the Clintons...
Their skepticism of the coronavirus acted as a kind of gateway to QAnon, inviting conspiracy theorists down a digital rabbit hole of bizarre, baseless delusion.
Quoting bogus conspiracies as though they were fact. Let's bring in our senior congressional correspondent, Manu Raju. Manu, you've been looking into the president's newest claims about the FBI. What are you finding out?
Yeah, that's right, Wolf. Trump's latest claim came...
When referring to the term conspiracy theory, many people don't too often consider what that word really means and consider its origin of where it really came from. Interestingly, we cannot talk about this term without first bringing up the assassination of former US President John F. Kennedy. Kennedy's assassination that occurred on November 22, 1963 gave birth to many theories as to how, who, and why Kennedy was assassinated. Following his death, Kennedy's vice president, Lyndon B. Johnson, would be sworn into office and assemble a team to investigate the murder of JFK. This team would be famously coined as the Warren Commission, who would investigate and document much evidence such as eyewitness reports and multiple visits to Dallas where JFK was shot, to bring together a cohesive and comprehensible report to answer the many questions that people had surrounding the murder. It is also of interest to note that only 2 days after JFK's assassination, his alleged killer, Lee Harry Oswald, would also be killed by a man named Jack Ruby. Following the completion of what is now called the Warren Report, many people began questioning the validity of the report, calling into question, for example, the alleged assassin's motives, where the bullets hit JFK, and even if there could have been multiple accomplices involved, such as the CIA, the FBI, and even the vice president himself.
Apparently official President Kennedy died at 1 p.m. Central Standard Time.
Strangely enough, all the criticism that the Warren Commission was receiving for the Warren Report was actually capturing the attention of none other than the CIA. One might ask why the CIA even cared about the criticisms that people were concerned about when it came to the Warren Commission's findings. The CIA would produce their own document titled Countering Criticisms of the Warren Report, or otherwise known as Document 1035-960. In this document, they seem to stress and outline their concerns about people asking questions concerning the Warren Report. Even stranger and more suspicious about Document 1035-960 is that it doesn't seem to just focus and imply that the CIA was only interested in the concerns only, but it seems that this document had an action statement to it, as it is implied that people who seem to question the official narrative of things were onto some kind of conspiracy. The CIA outlines in their first paragraph titled, Our Concern. Various writers have now had the time to scan the Commission's published report and documents for new pretexts for questioning, and there has been a new wave of books and articles criticizing the Commission's findings. In most cases, the critics have speculated as to the existence of some kind of conspiracy. Now, at its root, the negative connotation and reputation of the term conspiracy theory may be traced back to a man named Richard Hofstadter, who was a liberal historian. But as we see in this document, this term was in use to basically be weaponized by the CIA themselves to label specific individuals, specifically those who were asking questions. And as we read later down in 1035-960, the true goal of this document is outlined in the second paragraph. It isn't until the near end of the second paragraph of document 1035-960 that the CIA makes very clear what their goal is, which is to quote, provide material for countering and discrediting the claims of conspiracy theorists. So basically, where the discussion wasn't taking place, the CIA didn't have to do anything because they didn't feel threatened. But it's where the discussion was taking place. They even outline this in the third paragraph titled Action. So to what degree and length did the CIA really go to using these propaganda tactics? And were these propaganda tactics even legal? Well, let's take a look and find out. Let's let the document speak for itself. Some of the tactics that they use include the following. To discuss the publicity of liaison and friendly elite contacts, especially politicians and editors, pointing out that the Warren Commission made as thorough investigation as humanly possible, and to point out that further speculative discussion only plays into the hands of opposition, and that conspiracy talk appeared to be deliberately generated by communist propaganda. There's an interesting term there, and it says friendly elite contacts, specifically and especially editors and politicians. These are the people that are making the news stories. These are the people that are passing the laws. These are the people in positions of power. When you have people in positions of power and the CIA is essentially leaking information to them, they say, hey, use this information, tell them that the Warren Commission did the best job as humanly possible and that there isn't anything wrong. People who are basically suggesting otherwise are pretty much in favor of the enemy. In this case, specifically in the 1960s, given the background, we know that there was a lot of communist propaganda. The main premise here is that they wanted to become friends with elite contacts. They wanted them, their assets, as the CIA calls it in this document, to become close to the politicians, to the editors, to these people in high-ranking positions, so they could put the public in their place and say, hey, the Warren Commission did what they could do. And this is to pretty much diffuse and deflect any type of criticism, that the Warren Report has received, as we already know.
So to go back to the CIA, I think it was completely deliberate that the CIA, which even as early as 1948, that's when the Operation Mockingbird began, when the CIA as an entity realized the importance of the public mind and how important it was to manipulate the public mind and set up a vast program of manipulation. That the very intelligent people, very intelligent but very immoral people working for the CIA, they came to realize that if you have a particularly powerful phrase, that it is, as you've said, like a weapon. And so they ran across this phrase, conspiracy theorist. As I say, it was first used, according to my research, around 1920 by an American author whose name I forget. And they thought, wow, what a tremendous label to pin on anybody who questions the findings of the Warren Commission. And so we do actually have the documentary proof that the CIA sent out these secret communiques to the people they call their assets in the media to begin to use that term, conspiracy theorist, against anybody who was questioning the findings of the Warren Report.
Do you have any people being paid by the CIA who are contributing to a major circulation American journal?
We do have people who submit pieces to American journals.
Do you have any people paid by the CIA who are working for television networks?
This, I think, gets into the kind of getting into the details, Mr. Chairman, that I'd like to get into in executive session.
Propaganda, lies, and the spread of misinformation. Among all of these things the CIA was funneling into the mainstream media, they found themselves before what's known as the Church Committee. This committee had an incredibly hard task ahead of them, which was, this committee was responsible for investigating the illegal actions that intelligence agencies may have been up to. These agencies included the FBI, the NSA, and obviously the CIA. We see at one of the Church Committee hearings that the CIA was being questioned about their involvement in manipulating the media, as well as politicians. And going back to the question of if their tactics were legal, I think the evidence speaks for itself. These were illegal propaganda tactics to shape and mold a generation to get people to believe whatever the CIA wanted them to believe. The horrific part about all of this, though, was that it dipped into the realm of actual psychological warfare on the American public.
At CBS, we had been contacted by the CIA. As a matter of fact, by the time I became the head of the whole news and public affairs operation in 1954, ships had been established, and I was told about them and asked if I'd carry on with them.
The CIA has a very dark record, especially when analyzing accounts of horrific documentation of the infamous Operation Paperclip, which recruited Nazi war criminals, specifically Nazi scientists who tortured many during World War II. This operation gave way to unconventional methods of human experimentation that began making its way to America. Who did they test per these experiments? They tested unwitting, innocent American people, the average everyday person, you and me. And the inhumane experimentation of studying the human mind would aid the CIA greatly to engage in a secret war on the home front of America. A war not fought with guns, bombs, or physical weapons, but one fought with lies, propaganda, and deceit for the purpose of mastering mind control.
Evidence of wrong.
I was there for a while and I thought, I don't want to stay here, and I started to run away from the hospital, and they grabbed me and then they put me on sleep treatment. And they kept you asleep for 23 days. And while I was asleep, they were shocking the heck out of me with electric shocks and playing tapes.
As well as the experimental drugs and massive electric shock treatments, Mrs. Huard was subjected to psychic driving. Hypnotic-like messages were repeated over and over to a sleeping patient, sometimes for as long as 16 hours in a row. The electric shock treatments were administered on an unprecedented scale. It was called de-patterning. The mind was short-circuited so the psychic driving hypnotic messages could be planted on a clean slate. They were a key part of the mind control experiment. This is how Mrs. Huard remembers one of the messages.
Why are you running away from your responsibilities?
I would try very strongly not to let my mind be capturing all the messages, but they would lower my resistance so much with the heavy drugs, but I couldn't do otherwise than listen.
As you probably know, electroshock treatment has been given for depression for something like 40 years now. It's a very successful and useful treatment for severe depression that doesn't respond to other things. But depatterning is a use of electroshock treatment in a totally different way, in which instead of giving the shocks, say, 2 or 3 times a week, they're given 2 or 3 times a day for 3 or 4 weeks, reducing the patient to a sort of animal, vegetable state, from which it's hoped that they would recover in a more healthy state of mind. It didn't work.
It becomes a scary reality when one realizes that these experiments were conducted over 60 years ago, and the fact that they were successful 60 years ago. So you could imagine the kinds of advancements they've made within a 60-year time frame. Among the ability to weaponize the usage of propaganda tactics, drugs, and electric shock treatment to wipe the mind clean as to enter new information, the document titled The Invisible Third World War highlights the different kinds of warfare used among the military and intelligence agencies. And horrifying enough, the document highlights that the CIA, decades ago, had mastered the ability of another form of mind control, which is the ability to manipulate electromagnetic waves within the atmosphere to be able to manipulate a person's behavior and feelings. And in short, the article horrifyingly concludes that, in fact, the Earth's ionosphere oscillates at approximately the same frequency as the human brainwaves, making it a perfect carrier off of which electromagnetic radiations in the brainwave range can be bounced without any change of frequency. The relationship between the electromagnetic sphere and the electromagnetic bases of the human body can be exploited as a strategic weapon.
But this time he actually talked. Hey Anderson, we had a great interview last time. I was wondering if you get a chance to look into Operation Mockingbird? You know what that is.
You're talking about something, what, from the 1950s, dude?
1970s official declassified program, how the CIA infiltrated the mainstream media from the higher up.
Right.
It's declassified.
I read about it in college, yes, I do. Thanks.
Do you think it's something that could possibly be happening today?
I have no comment for you, thanks, dude.
Why not? I mean, you didn't have any journalistic training except CIA training. But that's actually stated on his own Wikipedia, and he admittedly was trained to be in the CIA when he was in college and received no journalism training.
If there's anything that we should surmise from everything that we just learned, from Project MKULTRA to Project Mockingbird, and even to Document 1035-960, is that there is one thing in common between all of those, is that the government is interested in teaching us what to think and not how to think. We ought to be thinking critically, we ought to be asking questions, but we have a government that's interested in us not asking questions, not critically thinking, and in turn not being able for us to think for ourselves. So what happens is that we rely solely on the media, we rely solely on politicians. But what happens when those politicians and the media companies that we so trust have information being funneled in by intelligence agencies? And we live in a society where if you ask these questions, if you seek out questions and answers about MKUltra, about Project Mockingbird, you're called a conspiracy theorist. The next time somebody calls you a conspiracy theorist, just tell them that the only difference between you and them is that you ask questions. That's all. And you would have to be living in a backward society, as we do. We're asking questions, we're trying to get to the bottom of things, and we're not in a place where you don't have to rely on the government to feed you every piece of information that you have. Document 1035-960 showed us and outlined in great detail that they had their assets trying to manipulate people to get them to think a certain way. It almost seems like a 1984 Orwellian type thing. So thank you for watching, and hopefully we'll see where this goes. You see, it's not about left or right, it's not about Democratic or Republic, it doesn't matter. What matters is how you think for yourself. Don't allow media companies, don't allow a government to teach you what to think. Learn how to think. Because in a society where no one thinks critically, everyone's the same, and everyone just acts like robots. So think, start a conversation, and thank you for watching. This has been The Conversation, and I'll see you in the next video.